F-Zero GX, or as I like to call it, Falcon Zero Good Excellent, is a futuristic racing game released for the GameCube in 2003. Most people know this series as the home of the big man upstairs, that, of course, being Captain Falcon, but not many people know much beyond that, as the series was put on hiatus in 2004 after 2 more Game Boy Advance games were released, and it's been in this heartbreaking break since. I call this break heartbreaking because the game is really good. Like, there hasn't been a better racing game in the last 17 years kind of good. Driving a car fast is something I deem to be innately human, perhaps even innate to being alive. A theory I would check with my cat if I spoke French. And with online play, skill-based matchmaking, modern racer customization, my list of could-have-beens for this series extends even into me creating a homebrew D&D type tabletop RPG based on the world and its stories. And that's what I'm talking about here today, not the, pardon my language, objective quality of this little cutie, but the strange, hilarious, expansive, troubling, overtly sexual, and wonderful world it has hidden in the depths of its data disk, a world that you really only catch glimpses of through the diminutive story mode, which has 9 missions and about as many minutes of cutscenes, and from each of the game's 40 colorful pilot profiles, wherein each playable character is given a paragraph or 2 telling their own personal story. And yet, this extremely limited amount of information hasn't left my head since getting the game as a teeny baby, whether that was the fact that this turtle wants to kill you, yes, you, or that this man was designed by a human being in the first place, or that this universe is the exact same one that Star Fox takes place in. There's something deeply special and strange about it all, and today I'm going to construct for you the world and timeline that I'm about 83% sure no developer ever intended to exist in the form that I see it in. I'm very interesting, and this is the story of F-Zero GX.
Switch it.
I'll begin this essay by constructing for you the most important elements of the F-Zero GX universe. This is with the goal of creating in your mind, as it exists in mine, a network of living, breathing, interconnected beings. A series of planets with peoples and histories dating back hundreds of years, cities and the economic structure that fuels them, the widely accepted and the marginal of socio-political opinion. I'm going to weave, as well as I can, a place in which you might even see yourself living. And I'm going to do this all with evidence provided in-game and only a little extrapolation. Through extensive study, I've found that the F-Zero GX universe is based off of 2 core tenets. 1, the Earth in the year of 2003 projected hundreds of years into the future, and 2, racing. As for the first point, I say 2003 specifically because it is the year in which GX was released. And the reason I don't just say Earth as it exists is because in multiple instances it's clear that while this place exists within an intergalactic, highly advanced framework, certain things simply did not progress much further than beyond 2003's version of Earth. In Drax's pilot profile movie, he is shown playing a GameCube on a CRT television, 2 things long since out of not only style, but production as well. True, Drax could be a collector or game aficionado of sorts, but if that were the case, would he so recklessly destroy his relic of a television? I think not. Let's talk about the character Mr. EAD. You may have missed it initially being shocked by his grotesque appearance, but take note of the classic Mario series staple, the Starman, on his belt. Now, the Starman, without the total collapse of Nintendo, would likely never be within the realm of public domain, which then directly implies that this man, an android, is created by Nintendo. But the wiser of viewers might know something else here. EAD is the colloquial name that was given to Nintendo Entertainment Analysis and Development, formerly the largest software development division within Nintendo. Formerly because in 2015, Nintendo EAD went defunct. That means that, at the very least, this timeline must branch after 2003, but before 2015. For a game set in the 26th century, this is an extremely tight span of time. I won't go into fashion decisions made by some of the popular characters, which look extremely dated, but we all know fashion is cyclical, so the argument would be weak. A point worth noting, though, nonetheless. Now the second point, that being that the F-Zero GX world is based on racing. It doesn't take much extrapolation to get to this point, but I'll go over a few examples, such as characters like PJ's backstory being that this regular cab driver transitioned seamlessly into this death race, same for the delivery drivers Drac and Roger Buster. Or that the Galactic Space Federation, seemingly the largest and most prominent governing body this world knows, has 2 of its representatives racing in the Grand Prix, likewise with various alien species representing their oppressed home planets in hopes of taking home the prize money to help. The character, the Skull, was brought back to life after being dead for over 100 years using, quote, black magic and science, because he was a good racer in the series that preceded F-Zero by 2 centuries called F-Max. There are also the characters Rex and Billy, a dinosaur and monkey respectively, gifted with humanoid form and advanced intelligence due to great leaps in science. And what do the scientists choose to do with these incredible creations? Put them in rocket cars and send them racing against professionals at literally over 1,000 kilometers an hour, where hurtling off course in no uncertain terms means death. The most obvious proofs of this claim come from the story mode, in which every challenge Falcon faces is solved within the framework of winning races. Gang members outnumbering you, wanting to steal your racer and likely your wallet, race them, and they accept the outcome, albeit while throwing a tantrum. A bomb is placed on Falcon's car which will explode if he drives under 700 kilometers per hour. Why not just blow him up? Because there would be no counterplay in race format. Black Shadow, Falcon's rival and right troublemaker alongside his boss, specifically want to defeat Falcon in the F-Zero Grand Prix, and barely in any other context. The display televisions show F-Zero, bars play F-Zero, there's a featured channel called F-Zero TV, the music playing in the background talks about F-Zero, there are F-Zero championship belts of both light and darkness, which, when combined together, form an ultimate belt that summons a strangely Christian god in the form of the Trinity, who want to race for the fate of the universe. Ocean planets feature F-Zero circuits, as do abandoned factories and magma pits. Densely populated cities have tracks with gravity-defying hairpin turns with no guardrails, meaning these multiple 1,000-kilogram vehicles traveling at thousands of kilometers per hour will fall into people's homes and places of work, but nobody cares because F-Zero racing takes precedent over all else, as it should be. I also believe it's worth noting that a common theme with much of the implied text in F-Zero GX is that this racing basis also extends into religion. Captain Falcon's theme song, while sounding like a real banger from Weezer's Green Album, vaguely refers to the captain only as he and him, with explicitly Christian-sounding lines such as, "Forever he will be my hero," "When I think of him I see no fear, feel no pain," and "Even I can feel the power when I think of him." I mentioned it in passing there a moment ago, but it literally happens that evil incarnate comes from hell to race Captain Falcon, and when light and dark championship belts are brought together, a trio of gods referring to themselves as the actual creators of the universe come out to race the captain. Which of these is the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, I couldn't say. Black Shadow wears devil horns and is in service of a greater evil. I'm sure an accurate guess could be made by now, but yes, there are countless more examples to work from here to make these points, but I believe I've said enough. F-Zero's people vary wildly in history, biology, and inclinations, essentially forcing a collective culture to boil down into its inhabitants' most basic common denominator of instincts, reducing the depth and complexity of sentient life into nothing more than breed and kill. If you've made it this far, I expect you'll allow me to explain. The characters featured in F-Zero behave in a remarkably body-focused manner. Multiple characters either are or were models or superstars, and a ton of the cast perform in their pilot profile movies on this strange stage where crowd opinion is the deciding factor in success and failure, and nearly all the performances on this stage are deeply sexual in nature, with camera angles focusing intentionally on erogenous body parts. Even outside of this stage, many pilot movies feature the racers in their own music videos, often, as before, dancing and showcasing their bodies in overtly sexual ways. Even if characters aren't doing promo material as such, nearly everyone is put into skin-tight clothing, flaunting either heaving breasts or disgustingly rippling muscles clearly not achieved through natural means. Captain Falcon, the Holy One himself, is not immune to this. His pilot profile movie shows him rescuing a baby from being hit by a train, yet he is still needlessly showy, and compounded with this, feels a deep shame having ripped his pants in the process, painting for us a picture of just how obsessed these characters are with their public image. And the violence these people preach about and commit to each other on and off the racetrack speaks to an utter lack of care for the competitors' lives or well-being. Of the game's numerous villain characters, over 3/4 of them profess either the desire or an outright plan to kill their competition. Sportsmanship is long since abandoned for all but the most honorable of competitors, and even then, their explicit vanity expresses just how carnal the culture of a complete lack of culture can and would become. Samurai Goro's child, Daigoro, is a striking example of both of these aspects, partly seeing as he is human, making him a viable lens for the mostly human audience to this video, but mostly because of his pilot profile movie. Goro attempts to teach his son to expertly use a deadly, sharpened weapon, but is surprised as Daigoro not only clearly outclasses his father in skill, but arrogantly flaunts his talents by cutting out the profile of an extremely provocative female figure. The sex and violence are ingrained in him, and it has happened to this poor child long before even puberty. But, like the pilots themselves, this violence and sexuality is clearly surface level. Its implication runs deeper, and like following the quiet, bassy musical echoes through busy city streets, if we take enough correct twists and turns, we can find the source, the metaphorical street performer with a damaged amplifier. We can follow Ariadne's thread all the way to the top, from where we can watch the ripples resonate into the series of events that leads to genocidal wars, the revival of the practice of outlawing, disregard for life as a whole, and Daigoro cutting paper into the figure of a sexy lady. The first step to reaching this point is finding out who or what is allowing these, by my metric, crimes against societal structure as a whole to occur. It's easy to write it off as something simple, the Jungian collective unconscious having been fundamentally altered at some point between 2003 and 2015. But if we're to wax philosophical here, we're going to do it right and mention that Jung only applied the collective unconscious to humanity and not to all intelligent life, aliens, for example. So if these aliens are to integrate into a society with an already pre-existing collective unconscious, the shadow as it were, then their own mentality would near certainly come to be at odds with humanity's. This now forces us to zoom in a degree, still yet further out than Daigoro's sexual deviancy, but no longer able to apply the sweeping brushstroke of human nature reflecting upon its society to this reckless abandonment they call a culture. F-Zero GX asks us to examine its world from the perspective of its world, rather than our own flawed and biased human standpoint that looks both backwards more than 17 years and forwards more than 600, which is precisely why I have been so enveloped by this piece of home interactive entertainment. It was in order to shed my earthly humanity and instead embrace the mindset of someone born in F-Zero's world, someone with racer memorabilia akin to Earthling's sports equivalent, someone with their eye in the sky, looking out for falling death machines every day on my 400km/h commute to work, someone born in Port Town, and what I feel is two things: fear and freedom. For a culture to allow F-Zero to occur in the manner it does, that being the manner that prioritizes entertainment over safety, it must have either no or extremely few enforceable rules. There is a key word there, that being enforceable. F-Zero GX's society will still paint their villains as bad guys, warning people of them, avoiding them, televising their misdeeds, and sending bounty hunters to capture them for breaking this society's rules. But Black Shadow, for example, is shown in the beginning of the story mode having burned buildings and destroyed pieces of a city, yet is approached not by police, but by journalists, to whom he speaks with. In doing so, he eggs on the only force he knows can stop him, and it's not a public government agency, it's Captain Falcon, a private business owner in the bounty hunting market. Are there police here? The answer, for the time being, is no. It's important to note that for bounty hunting to exist in this format requires, as I mentioned earlier, either that the practice of outlawing has been brought back or that there is no law in the first place. The culture here still has rules, though they almost seem to be unwritten, and are enforced on what seems like a totally casual basis, with the only motivator being money, except for with Captain Falcon, who's a nice little saint and doesn't give two cares about money, though that may be because his successes on the racetrack have left him with more money than he knows what to do with. The direction I'm heading with this is clear. It's that if there is, in fact, any form of a governing body, it exists in a near anarcho-capitalist state, with personal liberty and financial freedom being valued far more highly than equality or peace. To back this up, let's look at even more in-game examples of characters shattering what you or I would consider laws, but facing no penalty. The pilot profile of Don Genie, one of the secret racers, states that he has been imprisoned multiple times, my guess is with the Intergalactic Space Federation, but because of his successful business dealings is able to post bail again and again, and is even still allowed to race in the F-Zero Championship. Samurai Goro's movie shows him deliberately running over an old man in the street. Pico's reckless driving caused an accident that nearly killed many racers 4 years prior to when the game takes place. On top of that, Pico was, and likely still is, a contract killer. His pilot profile movie shows he is still extremely skilled with firearms. Antonio Guster falls asleep naked in a laundromat. Beastman hates all, as he phrases it, beasts, and is looking to imprison and or kill Biorex, that sentient lizard I mentioned earlier. But Biorex is intelligent life, and Beastman is heralded as a hero, implying extreme racism and injustice in all forms here. Michael Chain led a gang of up to 10,000 members, but is yet untouched by any sort of prison system. Multiple villain characters in their post-race interviews outright place death threats on individuals on live international television. Blood Falcon is a clone of the Captain, using DNA stolen from the crash that Pico caused 4 years prior. Not only that, but his brain was altered to be both evil and subservient, which implies the legality of slavery. Perhaps the worst of these come from the characters Leon and Octoman, who both race with the intention of helping their war-torn planets. Do you notice anything unusual about these two? Perhaps the fact that neither are human. Take note also that the representatives from the ever-present Galactic Space Federation are both human. And I have literally dozens more examples to prove this point, but I worry that we'd begin to lose the thread. Not all of this is as reprehensible as it seems, however. I mentioned that the feelings of your average Joe in the F-Zero universe were fear and freedom. For these acts to all be allowed also means that personal freedom is at an all-time high. There is little to draw from here using in-game examples, but one must imagine that if the worst someone gets for domestic terrorism is one bounty hunter being sent his way, then a world of avenues begin to open up in front of him, provided the freedoms of others do not immediately stomp his out. All drugs are legal. Self-defense isn't even limited to murder. He can sell whatever he wants to whoever he wants with no restrictions on honesty or fairness. Nobody can tell him when to go to bed or what shapes he can cut out of paper. He can shop for the cheapest price for anything, as there is no standard. This is, as I mentioned, simply conjecture, but by that same right, we could head down the opposite road, where landlords only rent to the highest bidder, businesses deal behind the backs of consumers to drive up prices to exorbitant levels, people are burned in their homes by characters such as Black Shadow, and opportunities for the have-nots are choked out by those who already have. I have, up until this point, neglected to mention the thing that throws a monkey wrench-sized banana peel on this proverbial Mario Kart track, and that is the final unlockable racer, Phoenix. Phoenix is a time-traveling policeman from approximately 300 years in the future, and this causes us trouble in clarity and consistency for a few reasons. The first of these being, obviously, the classic time travel fiasco, and the second being the fact that he is a police officer, the career I just spent 500 words explaining why it didn't properly exist anymore. And all we can do is assume that the self-destructive and ungoverned manner in which the F-Zero universe's society had been operating was fundamentally changed somewhere in that expansive gap of time. What causes me to lose sleep at night is that we simply have no way of knowing what happened in that time span, only that racing as a fundamental law has persisted. It could be revolt or societal collapse, peaceful reform, or gradual evolution. It could be that from the ashes of an anarchistic society rose something cruel and suffocating in the form of fascism, and Phoenix could be a member of the far-reaching implications of a police state. And far-reaching it is, as now even villains from times long past must live in fear, as Phoenix openly admits he's come to the past to make serious changes in the form of stopping a criminal that was going to cause an event that could have drastic consequences on the future. There are terrifying implications to this outside of the possibility for paradoxes, too. Anything could be made illegal in the future, and you could be committing a crime sitting in your home watching this video at this very moment. If something particularly controlling took hold, speaking out against your government could easily become punishable. And would a force that wishes to remain in power allow for dissent in any form? The answer is highly unlikely. And when this force can not only look into the window of time but open it and step through, opposition is forced into the state of a whisper. True, it's just as possible Phoenix operates on the principles of peace, but would a good-natured, peaceful, and most importantly, wise society choose to reach back in time and pluck out a core piece of its foundation? Or is it true that he's only chasing down criminals from his time who have already escaped into the past? And there's even more here, seeing as the final piece of this man's profile states he intends to travel to the 32nd century to track down a different criminal. That is another 300 years after even the time period he is from originally. We must ask, how does he know of a villain from the future? It's one thing to be able to jump through time both forward and back, but another altogether to hold a level of premonition about the timeline in general. This essentially lends Phoenix the power to manipulate the dance of time like a puppet on strings, and somehow he can understand the ripples that each of these tugs makes. Could someone so far removed from his own humanity even be brought into the thoughts of someone stuck in only one period? A force such as this advocating for destruction could eventually make enough trips to eradicate all other life, while one protecting peace for the lesser beings could end world hunger and stop every war before a disagreement even begins. He's not even limited to how far back he can travel. He says he received training from a 20th century racer. That's someone from before you and I. It's highly possible, in fact, I would say probable, that the timeline shift I mentioned earlier from between 2003 and 2015 happened because of Phoenix. And now, if we assume this to be true, we come to something crucial. We come to know who Phoenix is and exactly what he stands for. What did I say were this world's two core tenets? Earth in the year of 2003, and racing. Phoenix lives to race, nothing more and nothing less. So, the next time you play a racing game, watch the Olympics with your friends, take part in a foot race with a younger family member, or contribute to your favorite speedrunner's Twitch chat, remember that though we may not live in the world that could have been, someone somewhere just might. Thank you for watching. Oh, wait, we didn't even get into the magic yet. In Chapter 6, Black Shadow uses dark magic to bind and lift